Hey there, it's Irene Lyon. Welcome to this video, to this YouTube channel, and to this world of healing trauma, nervous system health, and all things neuroplasticity. I put out a note to you all here in the YouTube community of mine. What are your questions for me? I'm going to be creating more videos this year, so I wanted to see what you wanted to know more about. And one question came from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. And it was, how do you develop intuition? And this is a great question. And of course, we could have a 2-hour lecture on this, but I'm going to hit on three main things to pay attention to and work with to develop your intuition from a biological, nervous system, and really human perspective. I did another video on this a few years back, and I'll post it below on our senses. I call it the sixth sense. And here's what's interesting to me as sort of an introduction to this, is when we are born as babies, we have got the potential to, in my belief, be highly intuitive, very empathic, if I even dare say psychic. And a lot of this gets sort of bleached out of us as a result of our societal conditioning, how humans have been domesticated, cultures, again, society, rules, regulations, being in these homes that aren't in the natural world. And then of course, how we're parented, whether that's done in an attuned, secure, healthy, safe way, or if it's the opposite of that. So the three things I'm going to talk about today, one, I'll list them first, learning how to follow your impulses, specifically your biological impulses. The second, setting boundaries. And the third is our body movement. So the first one, follow your impulse. I like to say follow your biological impulse. This is something I teach my students all the time in my programs. And I've taught this to you from time to time on these videos, but it is listening to your biology. And if you don't know how to listen to it, starting to. And here are some of the kind of easiest ways to get into that. The one is listening to when you have to go to the bathroom. I know that might sound a little crazy, but we have been taught, and we were taught from a very young age, to hold it in. If you think about at school when, little Johnny or Susie puts their hand up in kindergarten and wants to go to the bathroom or to the toilet, however you would say it, depending on what country you live in, often a teacher might say, no, it's not time yet. Or someone is already, I remember in my kindergarten, someone's already there, only one person at a time. The trouble with this is that when a child has to go, typically it's because they have to go. And I have worked with many adults who have a lot of shame and a lot of stored trauma around having to go, not being able to, and then either wetting their pants or soiling their pants because they have to go poop. This is a really bad way to teach our young at the beginning how to listen to their bodily impulses. So as us humans that are older, really tune in when there's pressure in your bladder, when you have to go to the bathroom, whether it's to urinate or to pass a bowel movement. We have gotten really good at holding it in and tightening all these muscles in here to suck everything up. And yet by not listening to those cues and going when we need to, it starts to limit that natural intelligence of listening to our body. Another one would be hunger. And I know there's so many ways to look at this because the way we've been taught to eat food or not eat food or restrict food, etc., has been really, in some ways, messed up in our westernized cultures. And to listen to this, so to listen, am I hungry? To feel into the hunger cues. Am I full? And when we're full, to stop eating. And while it seems simple in me saying that, anyone who struggled with either overeating or undereating or not being able to gauge hunger cues, fullness, they'll know that this is not an easy thing to get back. Whereas when we were young, if I go back to how this might get thrown off the track, if we were fed on schedule, if we were fed with, say, a bottle where we were forced to drink our whole bottle, this disrupts in a way our natural cues to say, I don't want any more or I want more. If you think about a child nursing from a mom, there's no knowing of how much volume of milk is coming out. When the child is done, they're done and they stop suckling. And of course, it's hard for a mother to force a child to keep feeding when they're not hungry. Whereas with a bottle, we can mess up those signals. So those are just two examples of how you can start to follow your biological impulses. The first is to really listen when you have to go to the washroom, when you have to go to the toilet, and really honoring that. Consistently doing that over a few weeks, you might be surprised how you start to hear and listen to other parts of your biology that are talking to you, and yet you miss them because we're just not tuned into that. And then again, the second one was food, really listening to our hunger cues and being easy about it. It's not about beating ourselves up if we pass that cue or if we forget to eat and all of a sudden we're so low blood sugar that we're going to pass out. So it's not about setting up any shame cycles. It's just being a bit more aware of our biology and what it needs, because it will tell us what it needs. We just have to learn how to listen. The second thing that you can start to play with to develop your biological intuition is boundaries. Now, boundaries are a big topic, but let's just keep it simple. For example, if you are with, it could be a partner, a spouse, it could be a coworker, it could be a friend, maybe it's your boss. Of course, there's a spectrum here, but to really listen when you're, say, interacting with someone and you feel the desire to say, I don't like that, or what about this? Or that's not for me, or I would like to discuss that further. So boundaries can go both ways. It could be saying no to something, but it also could be saying yes to something. I would like more of that, or I would like to learn more about that. How many of us have been in, say, an education setting where the teacher says, are there any questions? And no one says a word. It's like silent. And yet you might have a question, but there's this fear of bringing up what you want to ask, what you want to say. I know that doesn't fall in line with boundaries, but it's kind of the polar opposite of saying no, is saying, yes, I actually have a question. I would like to know. And you'll know, and I've experienced this in my own schooling and lots of years of university and school, if there's something that needs to be asked, you will usually feel something stirring in your body. You might get hot, you might feel your heart start to pound because you want to speak, but then all of the past conditioning, maybe some past traumatic events where you did speak up and you got slapped, either literally or metaphorically. Maybe you were ridiculed, maybe you said something wrong, maybe you were reading out loud in class and something bad happened because of that. I mean, there's a million examples. But let's just say that something occurred where when you did speak up, when you did exert and express what you wanted to say, something that wasn't great occurred. That is going to trigger us. That's going to be overcoupled in our current adult world that says, that's not good, you shouldn't do that, keep your mouth shut, even though your entire physiology is sending off fireworks saying, ask this question, speak up, share your story. And so, again, boundaries, a way to feel into your impulse, tune back into your biology. Because we are human creatures, we communicate with our sound, with our language, with our expression. It's very important to listen to that and to allow it to come out, or to say, no, I don't want to talk. I don't want to discuss this right now. And then, of course, you know, whether you need to give a reason or not, it completely depends on the circumstance. But play with that, listen to your physiology, listen to the heart, the skin tone, the heat, the temperature of your body, and start to figure out the clues and the cues that let you know whether or not you should say no or you should say yes. And one more piece around boundaries. Again, it's this big topic, but this is where consent kind of has a sidebar, meaning if we were really little, or when we were really little, if we, say for instance, didn't want to kiss that auntie or give our grandma a hug, and yet our parents or our elders forced us to, against our will, that is a breach in our boundary. The little one is saying, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that, and then we're being pushed to do it. That also screws up with our intuition, because we're feeling this, no, I don't want to, and yet something is pushing us to do it, and this kind of messes with the signals. right? This comes back to attuning to a child. That would be an older kid, but even with a younger kid, if a baby, for example, is not wanting to engage with its main caregiver and he or she looks away, and there's been experiments that have been done with this in the past with infants, but if they look away, there's a reason they're looking away. They're looking away because they need a break, they need to deactivate their nervous system, there's just too much stimulation, so they turn away for a moment of pause. What one should do when a baby does that is respect it. You wouldn't imagine, I hope, having a baby do this when you're holding it and then forcing its head to look back at you and say, keep engaged with me, please, don't look away. If that occurs, there's usually something going on with the mom or the dad where their own attachment trauma, the ruptures with their primary caregivers, those wounds were not healed. And then when that said person, whether it's mother or father, has their own child, they feel like they're abandoned when their baby looks away. So this does connect with intuition, because that intuition that we have is built and nurtured and fostered based on the safety we have in our primary relationships, how our boundaries were respected, and also how we were attuned to with what we want and what we don't want, and then having that be respected. The third thing I wanted to talk about in regards to developing our intuition is our movement, our body, getting it moving in a way that isn't structured and linear. Now, I've done some videos, one specifically on exercise and the importance of getting activity in. And sometimes our activity has to be pretty linear. Walking, maybe you have to go to the gym where you use a treadmill or a stationary bike, or those machines where you're just kind of going in one spot. Maybe it's a stepping machine, maybe it's a set of dance moves that you do because that's how you like to get your movement. So there's nothing wrong with that. I want to preface this third thing with that. There's nothing wrong with linear movement. I do it myself. I like to swim, I like to walk, I like to cycle, but we also have to respect all of the dimensions, the three-dimensionality of our joints, of our abilities to flex and extend and rotate and spiral and look in all sorts of different ways. And part of getting our intuition back is getting that natural movement back that we were born with. I did another video ages ago, it's called Baby Live, and I'll link it below, but in it, it shows the natural human development that a baby human does to be able to move and crawl and crouch and stand up and walk. And all of these twists and turns that a baby does, crawling, playing, getting their heads in funny directions, that is building not only their joints and their ability to have spatial awareness, but it's building their creativity. It's building their ability to learn. There's a reason why we say kids for the first 5 years of their lives, really they should just be playing and exploring and moving their bodies. It's because that is giving the brain juice so that it can learn, so it can be more creative. So as adults, as big people, if we are feeling that we are lacking in our intuition, lacking in creativity, we want to get back into our bodies. We want to get back into our movement. And this is one of the things I teach in some of my work called Up and Down. And I wanted to read a passage from someone who came to a workshop, who got into their body in this more creative, biological way. So here's what this person wrote. They said, without a doubt, this form of movement, I call it up and down, but you could get this in any kind of creative movement class that isn't structured. They said, it's provided me with invaluable tools for being more fully myself, less checking my intuition against various rule books. And they quoted rule books. It's allowing me to be more present and more comfortable. The safety I feel transmits more safety into general atmosphere for groups, one-on-one and everyday interactions. So I really like this because it's showing that when this person got into the more natural, biological, impulsive movements that the body wanted to do, very similar to listening to our needs to go to the bathroom, to eat when we're hungry, to stop eating when we're full, to set boundaries, or to invite more information into our system. When we do that with our movement from a more organic way, it develops our intuition, and we start to realize that we have so many rules around how we are meant to move, how we're supposed to look when we dance, how we're supposed to look when we're stretching, when we're moving, when we're yawning, all these things that we do that are just natural within our bodies. So I love this because it just shows that yes, when we get into this natural movement that our bodies have and have the potential for, it opens up lots of other pathways, not just in movement and joint flexibility and just our ability to have better posture and have better range in general, but it transmits to our brain and to this natural intuition that we all have. We just need to get it back. So to rewind back to the beginning, the question from Sarah was, how do I develop my intuition? The first thing I mentioned was our ability to really follow our biological impulses. The second was this idea, kind of this broad category of boundaries, but also when we want more, when we want to ask for something, it's all about speaking up and listening to that gut that says no or yes. And then the third is movement and knowing that our bodies, in all of their joints and twists and turns and movement patterns, they need to be woken up. They're just doing linear movement day in, day out. We're not reaching the source of our human potential. And really what we're meant to do is to be creative as human beings. We don't want to be living in our survival impulses all the time. And we definitely don't want to, we want to have our intuition. And I'll leave with this note. When we have this more biological intuition in our system, in our cells, it keeps us safer. It keeps us more in check with our surroundings. We know when it's safe to walk down that dark alley or when it's not safe to walk down that dark alley. We know when someone that we meet is good for us or not good for us. We know when we should eat one thing versus another thing. So this element of biological intuition, it is more than just the psychic ability or empathic ability. It's choice, it's safety, it's health, and it's just engaging with the universe and with the world and others in a much more potent, effective, and really fun way. So I hope this has answered your question, Sarah. Hope this has been useful for other people here listening to this. It's a fun topic for me because I really have seen that when we get into these biological practices, when we get out of our survival stressors, which I cover in other videos in more depth, we really do land into that intuition and it just becomes something that is second nature rather than something that we're always trying to find and figure out. All right, thank you so much for being here and we will see you next time.